Senator Payman will now move to question time, and I'll call Senator Cash.
Thank you, President. And my question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Minister, yesterday in your statement to the Senate, you addressed the issue of your role in the Commonwealth settlement. You said, the Minister for Finance has no decision-making role in processes around significant legal matters. Absolutely none. And you quoted paragraph 3.2 of the Legal Services Directions. Guidance Note 7, issued by the Office of Legal Service Coordination, relates to paragraph 3 of the directions. The guidance note explicitly refers to your role as the relevant portfolio minister, requiring an agency seeking to settle a matter to provide information about any approvals by or briefings to the portfolio minister before a settlement request is provided to the Attorney-General. Was a brief or any form of advice ever provided to you or to your office on this claim or proposed settlement as envisaged by the guidance note, and if not, why not?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Before I call the minister, I am going to ask senators for silence. That was a complex question. I need to hear it, and I also need to hear the minister's answer. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, Senator Cash. No, from my memory, I did not receive a brief or any advice from my department. As to, I think it was quite detailed in terms of any other advice that may have come to the office. I would just want the opportunity to check that. But from my point of view, I had no role and no briefing from the Department of Finance.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash, first supplementary.
Did you ever declare a conflict in relation to any aspect of this matter, including the proposed settlement?
Order.
Or did you ever seek advice in relation to a potential conflict? If so, when and to whom?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, it never came to me, so there was never any conflict to declare. If it had come to me, I would have declared a conflict, but it didn't. It didn't cross my desk. I did not get a brief. If there is anything further that I can update the Senate about that, I will.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Thank you. Did you or your office have any communication with the Attorney-General or his office in relation to the proposed settlement of this matter? And if so, please detail the timing of that contact.
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister.
I certainly had no contact with the Attorney-General. Again, just for the purposes of being absolutely clear to the Senate, I will take other aspects of that on notice, because that would require me going and speaking with other people. But from my point of view, no.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Walsh.
Thank you very much, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister outline how the Albanese government's second budget addresses the cost of living pressures facing Australian households, many of whom are struggling right now?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for the question, and I can. And thank you for the question on the budget. We understand that the rising cost of living is hitting a lot of Australians hard. Australians with mortgages and Australians who rent are facing spiralling housing costs, groceries and prices for other services as well. Many Australians are struggling right now. That's exactly why the budget was carefully calibrated to take pressure off the cost of living for average Australians, rather than adding to it. And the centrepiece of our second budget was the $14.6 billion cost of living package. This budget provides responsible relief to Australians that need it most and undertakes some long overdue structural reforms that will set this country up to be fairer and more equal. It strikes the right balance between restraint and targeted cost of living relief, sustainably funding the services Australians depend on now and into the future, and positions Australia to make the most of new opportunities. Our policies to ease cost of living pressures are expected to directly reduce inflation by 0.75 percentage point in 2023-24. In terms of those cost of living measures, the record investment in bulk billing, supporting 11.6 million eligible Australians to access a GP with no out-of-pocket costs, cheaper medicines via changes to pharmacy maximum dispensing quantities, which will reduce the cost of medicines by up to half, for at least 6 million Australians, and you'll be hard-pressed to find an Australian who wants to pay more for their medicine. And our energy price relief plan, up to $3 billion of electricity bill relief through the Energy Bill Relief Fund to take pressure off households and small businesses in partnership with state and territory governments. This will benefit more than 5 million eligible households and 1 million eligible small businesses. Plus, we are providing assistance to the most vulnerable Australians with increases to payment.
Senator Walsh, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the minister explain how the government's economic plan is addressing cost of living pressures rather than adding to them due to the complex and ever-changing economic pressures and world events right now?
Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for her question. The Albanese government's economic plan is carefully calibrated to provide targeted relief to those that need it most, whilst not aggravating inflation. The May budget was very carefully designed with this in mind and has successfully walked this line between giving a hand to Australians in need and not causing inflation. In fact, Danielle Wood, head of the Grattan Institute, told the Sydney Morning Herald on May the 10th that Labor have managed to walk that short-term line between giving some relief, particularly to the most disadvantaged households, and not substantially adding to inflationary pressures. Inflation will still be higher than we'd like and more persistent than ideal, but down from where it would have been. We're making a meaningful difference to families and individuals around the country. These cost of living pressures have been largely driven by Russia's illegal war in Ukraine, and they have been made worse by a decade of wasted opportunities from the previous government with its energy policy chaos and failure to address the nation's skill shortages.
Senator Walsh, second supplementary.
Can the minister detail the work the government is doing to ensure it can continue to address cost of living pressures going forwards?
Thank you, Senator Walsh. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Walsh for her question. Yes, I can. We are putting a lot of work into improving the budget overall. As people will remember, we inherited a budget heaving with debt and with deficits for as far as the eye can see. And now we are improving the budget. We're returning revenue upgrades to pay down the debt we inherited. We're forecasting a surplus. We're investing in the services that are needed now and setting things up for the future. All of this is about providing the room to make sure that our budget can invest in programs which continue to support Australian households and easing their cost of living pressures. This is responsible economic management, it's responsible budget management, and I know it pains those opposite that we are managing the budget in an adult and responsible way, but that is what the people of Australia expect us to do, and that is what we are doing.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Payne.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Yesterday, in answers to a question from Senator Birmingham, the minister said that in the week prior to the 15th of February, the minister came into receiving information through the partner of a young woman who was going to raise those allegations, unquote. In an answer to Senator Cash, the minister said, "What you are asking me to do is to disclose information that was given to me and asked to be kept in confidence." I asked the minister, was part of that information that you came into receiving a copy of material that was always intended to be made public, specifically a copy of the transcript of the project interview or the interview itself prior to its release?
Thank you. Senator Payne. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. Well, I dealt with these issues yesterday. Yes, I did. Well, I did deal with them. It may not have been to your satisfaction, but I dealt with them in the way that I am going to deal with them, which is the statement I made, and I will go back to that, and the fact that I was given information from a young woman who made a serious allegation about something horrific that had happened to her in this workplace, allegedly. Except that allegedly, but there was some allegedly had occurred in this workplace in this building between two Liberal staffers in a Liberal minister's office.
Minister, please resume your seat. The minister is on her feet answering, and there is constant interjections across the chamber, all of which are disorderly. Minister, please continue.
As I said yesterday, I was provided with that information in the days leading up to that information or stories becoming public. But it wasn't my story, it was Ms Higgins' story, and she had asked me to keep that information confidential, which I did.
Order.
I don't intend.
Senator Ruston, your constant interjections are disorderly and disrespectful. Please, Senator Ruston. Minister, please continue.
I don't intend to breach that confidence now, and I didn't then. And I have been approached in the last 24 hours by women.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order. Minister, please continue.
I treated that information in the way that I treat all information that comes to me and is asked to be kept confidential, as I would hope everybody in this building does when people approach them with information and ask them to keep it confidential. I treated this information exactly the same way, and I would say that I have been contacted, and I'm sure plenty of people in this place have been contacted by women who are extremely concerned with how this discussion is occurring.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Payne, first supplementary.
Minister, was the partner of a young woman the only source of the information to which you refer? Or did you receive any information prior to the 15th of February from Ms Wilkinson, representatives of the project, anyone else from Network 10 or any other media organisation?
Thank you, Senator Payne. Minister Gallagher.
The answer to that is no. I did not receive any other information from any other source. The information that came to me only came through Ms Higgins and through her partner. And I was asked to keep that information confidential. I did. It was a serious allegation. I was shocked by it. I was stunned. I couldn't believe that something like that allegedly had occurred in this place a couple of years earlier. I was shocked by it, and I was shocked by how upset this young woman seemed to be. And I would just remind people, because there are essentially two charges against me. One, that I misled the Senate, which I've tried to deal with. Obviously not to your satisfaction, but I've been as honest as I can on that. The second charge is that I had some role in the compensation payment. I have not. I did not. And so take those issues up with me. Continue to take the issues up with me.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Payne, second supplementary.
So yesterday you advised the Senate that you did, and I quote, absolutely nothing with the information provided. Can the minister categorically guarantee to the Senate that the minister provided no feedback or suggestions in response to the information provided, as has been publicly alleged?
Thank you, Senator Payne. Minister Gallagher.
I refer you to my statement. I'm not. This was the manner with which this story became public.
Order.
The timing of this story becoming public. The decisions about Ms Higgins' story and how she wanted to tell it had absolutely nothing to do with me. Absolutely nothing. Well, the implication is in that question from Senator Payne is that I was involved in it, and I wasn't. And I wasn't. And I wasn't.
Order.
And I want to remind people here today just what the message this chamber is sending out to every other woman that might want to stand up.
Please resume your seat. Please resume your seat. Order. Order. Order on my left and my right. These are difficult questions and difficult answers. And I'm asking that you listen respectfully and in silence. Minister, please continue.
That I would say that this chamber should think about how this debate and the ongoing coverage of it is impacting on all the women out there who we are with one mouth saying stand up and tell your story and we will support you. And in the other tongue, using the other tongue,
thank you, Minister.
if
The
you
time
dare
for
to do it,
answering
if you
has
dare to do
expired.
it,
Minister, resume your seat. Order. Order. Order across. Minister, resume your seat. Order. Order. I'm not sure who made that comment. I am calling on you to stand up and withdraw it. I'm not going to repeat it. I think you're well aware of what was said. Senator Wish, that's enough. Seriously. I heard it and so did a lot of other people. Thank you for withdrawing, Senator McGrath. Senator Whish-Wilson.
Thank you, President. My question is to Senator Wong, representing the Environment Minister, and my question is about the government's Zero Extinctions Pledge. 2 weeks ago in Senate estimates, Dr Helene Marsh, the chair of the Threatened Species Scientific Committee, said she'd written to Minister Plibersek with concerns about the endangered Tasmanian Maugean skate after new scientific information revealed population levels have halved in the past 10 years, and scientists warned the species was one extreme weather event away from extinction. She also said the committee would be meeting within the fortnight and she would be recommending the species conservation status be uplifted to critically endangered. Can the minister confirm the skate's conservation advice has now been upgraded to critically endangered?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Senator Wong.
Thank you to President, and thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson, for the question. And I appreciate also that we had some opportunity to get some briefing, which I will also add to if it's insufficient. I understand that the Threatened Species Scientific Committee did meet last week in relation to the Maugean skate. I am also advised that the committee have yet to provide the minister with a formal recommendation to change the status of the skate. I'm advised that the primary threat to the Maugean skate is reduced water quality in Macquarie Harbour, particularly decreased levels of dissolved oxygen. In the meantime, whilst the committee is considering this matter in order to be able to determine whether it will and what the content of a formal recommendation to change the status of the skate to the minister would be, I'm advised that in the meantime there is action underway, that the federal and Tasmanian governments are working with experts and stakeholders to update the existing conservation advice for the species, to host a series of workshops to better understand the threats and critical conservation actions for the Maugean skate, convene a recovery team and identify funding for conservation actions. I'm also advised there is work underway to identify possible funding for emergency research. There has already been in excess of $500,000 invested from the federal government for priority Maugean skate recovery. Obviously, we are in a situation where this portfolio under the previous government was substantially neglected, and Ms Plibersek is made it clear the importance of protecting more of what is precious.
Thank you, Minister. The time for
answering
more of what is damaged. Senator Whish-Wilson, first supplementary.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And Senator Wong has answered some of my second question. At Senate estimates, the Threatened Species Commissioner, Dr Fiona Fraser, also explained there are numerous pressures impacting and risking the skate, including industrial salmon farming. She said that Minister Plibersek was writing to her state counterparts in Tasmania calling for an extreme intervention to prevent a possible extinction of this skate. What is this extreme intervention? Will it include getting salmon farms out of Macquarie Harbour?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Minister Wong.
Well, I can confirm, I thank the Senator for a supplementary. I can confirm that the Minister has written to the Tasmanian Government and has received a response from the Tasmanian Minister. I'm advised that her letter, Minister Plibersek's letter, raised issues such as water quality in Macquarie Harbour. She noted that salmon farming and hydroelectric industries are regulated by the Tasmanian Government and she urged the Tasmanian Minister, I think Jench, is that correct, to work with industry on urgent interventions to rapidly reduce nitrogen outputs and to improve oxygen levels in the harbour. The point I was making at the conclusion of my answer to the primary was a broader point about the neglect and mismanagement by those opposite and the priority that Ms Plibersek, as Minister, is taking on protecting more of what is precious, repairing more of what is damaged and managing nature better for our children and our grandchildren.
Thank you, Senator Wong. Senator Whish-Wilson, second supplementary.
Yes, thank you, President. The scientists who discovered the Morgan Skate dubbed it the thylacine of the sea nearly 30 years ago, and these risks and pressures have been well known to us all now for well over a decade. The Albanese government is committed to a zero extinctions pledge. Is this commitment now at risk, given the dire predicament of the Morgan Skate, and will your government do everything it can in its power to prevent an extinction on our watch?
Thank you, Senator Whish-Wilson. Minister Wong.
Well, as the Minister has made clear, we do not accept extinctions as inevitable, which is the position that too often was, and the passivity that was too often taken by those opposite. So, of course, it is a priority to do what we can to better understand threats to species and use the most up-to-date advice to protect them. The government's Threatened Species Action Plan sets ambitious targets, including preventing new extinctions in this country, and the plan includes the Maugean skate as a priority species. The May budget, in addition to the $224.5 million in the Saving Native Species program, the Senator may recall the May budget included some in excess of $440 million, in excess of $400 million, almost 440, through the Natural Heritage Trust, the doubling of funding for national parks and increased funding for urban rivers.
Thank you, Minister. Senator White.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. People on low and modest wages have the least capacity to deal with the rising cost of living. How are wage increases assisting Australians with cost of living challenges, and how is the Albanese government standing up for workers and getting their wages moving again?
Senator Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator White, who, along with many people on this side of the chamber, has dedicated her working life to assisting working people, including right here in the Senate. And you're right, Senator White. One of the best ways that we can help Australians deal with cost of living pressures is by helping them get a pay rise. So I'm proud to say that under the Albanese government we are seeing wages get moving again. Since coming to government a year ago, we've overseen the largest increase in jobs of any new government on record and the fastest annual growth in wages in over a decade. After a decade, we know you don't like higher wages. We know you don't. It's one time it's spreadsheets, then it's higher wages, the things that set you off. After a decade of the Coalition's deliberate policy of keeping wages low, under the Albanese government we are now starting to see wages grow. Through our submission to the annual wage review, we advocated for a real increase for Australia's lowest paid workers.
Order. Minister, please continue.
I'll tell you what, the things that set you people off, higher wages, of all the things. Through our submission to the annual wage review, we advocated for a real increase for Australia's lowest paid workers, and the Fair Work Commission's annual wage review's 5.75% increase to awards is the biggest increase in history and will help 2.7 million low-paid workers. We've also delivered important reforms that are getting wages moving through the Secure Jobs Better Pay Bill, opposed by those over there, and we supported the Aged Care Work Value Case, which delivered a 15% pay increase to some of the hardest working Australians, something that the Coalition, of course, refused to do. Now, I've noticed the various comments of Senator Cash as the IR spokesperson about these issues, and she warned us when passing this legislation last year that it would potentially close down Australia. Well, I don't know. I'm having a look around. It looks pretty open to me. She also said that our changes would take us back to the dark ages. Well, I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty modern. I don't think they had iPhones in the dark ages, but apparently that's where we're going to end up.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator White, first supplementary. Senator White, you've concluded your answer. Senator White, first supplementary.
Under the previous Liberal and National government, the bargaining system had become too rigid and legalistic, leading to a decrease in agreement making. That certainly was my own experience, as you highlighted. Since passing the Secure Jobs Better Pay Act in December last year, how has the Albanese government delivered on its commitment to reinvigorating enterprise bargaining?
Senator Watt.
Thank you again, Senator White. And as I say, the Albanese government is proud to have done a lot already in our first 12 months to get wages moving again, even though we know it's the thing that those opposite hate most. And enterprise bargaining is key to getting wages moving again. Under the coalition, it fell away and more people became reliant on awards than should have been the case. And since our Secure Jobs Better Pay bill was passed, against the opposition of those opposite, employers are now back at the bargaining table, many of whom have not been bargaining for many years. Thanks to our important Secure Jobs Better Pay reforms, we've seen workers in traditionally feminised sectors accessing the supported bargaining stream to reach agreements across multiple employers, and workers in early childhood education are now using this stream to negotiate wage increases across the sector. We've got the single interest bargaining stream starting to be strengthened to stop a race to the bottom on wages and conditions. Every single one of these things was opposed by the LNP. Every single one of those wage rises that we called for was opposed by the LNP. We've now got a government that supported wage rises, and that's helping Australians.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator White, second supplementary.
We know that even when there are strong bargaining outcomes, some employers still use labour hire to undercut the pay and conditions of their workers. I for myself saw that day in, day out at Qantas, for example. What is the Albanese government doing to close the loopholes that some employers use to undercut employee pay and entitlements?
Minister Watt.
Thanks, Senator White. And unfortunately, we have seen too many big employers in Australia use these loopholes to undercut people's pay. And the Albanese government made it clear before the election, and we're making it clear now, that we want workers to have more secure jobs and better pay. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're raising the bar on awards, on enterprise agreements, on bargaining, and lifting the floor for workers. It's a shame we are still seeing some employers using existing loopholes to circumvent the pay and conditions of their workers, including by exploiting the use of labour hire. Now, we acknowledge that there is a role for labour hire in our economy, especially for short-term surge workforce needs, but the system is being abused by too many employers at the moment to undercut people's pay and conditions. Currently, our system allows for an employer to have an enterprise agreement that they've fairly negotiated with their workers. The enterprise agreement has a fair rate of pay that's been agreed upon and voted up by the workers. But unfortunately, we are seeing employers rip people off by exploiting labour hire, and our same job, same pay policy is designed to bring that to an end.
Thank you, Senator Watt. The time for answering has expired. Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Senator Gallagher. I refer to a report in the Australian Financial Review on 6 February 2023 which highlighted allegations of corruption, threats and intimidation on the part of decision-makers leading Aboriginal organisations incorporated under the CATSI Act or registered as charities, receiving millions of dollars of taxpayer funding to deliver Indigenous disability services. Is the Minister aware operators involved in these allegations are connected with multiple Indigenous organisations sitting on boards or as part of senior management with responsibility for millions of dollars of taxpayer-funded grants and are allowed to continue to do so while being investigated by multiple government departments in relation to alleged fraud and misappropriation?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. And I might have to take the majority of that question on notice, Senator Hanson, because I'm not fully across it. I've had got a number of briefs here that have been provided to me, but it might assist if I come back with a comprehensive answer for you, because I haven't previously been briefed on this. But I'll take your next question and see whether I can answer some of it through that.
Senator Hanson, first supplementary.
When was the Minister first made aware of these allegations and the fact that whistleblowers who made them were being systematically victimised and threatened in an effort to silence them?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you, President. I will have to take that on notice. That information isn't in the information I have before me, but I will endeavour to come back. I'm sorry I can't assist you further today, Senator Hanson, but I'll see if we can get you an answer as quickly as possible.
Senator Hanson, second supplementary.
To the best of my knowledge, the minister was made aware of this matter more than 2 years ago. What has the minister done to ensure that alleged perpetrators of misappropriation of Indigenous grants meant for vulnerable and disadvantaged Indigenous communities are identified, investigated and, if warranted, prosecuted in a timely and transparent manner?
Minister.
Thank you. Based on that time frame, it would have been a different minister if a minister was made aware 2 years ago. And so I'll see what I can find from the point that Minister Burney took on the responsibilities just over a year ago. But I have no doubt that Minister Burney, once being briefed on these concerns, would have taken action, and I'll see what I can come back to the chamber with in terms of that information as soon as I can. My apologies that I'm not in a position to answer it today.
Thank you, Minister Gallagher. Senator Henderson.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Finance, Senator Gallagher. Minister, on the 7th of June 2023, in an interview on ABC-RM Breakfast, journalist Hamish McDonald put the following statement to you. David Shiraz said, "I've got a friend in Labor, Katie Gallagher." And Mr McDonald asked if Mr Shiraz was a friend. You responded, "He was a journalist here in Canberra when I was Chief Minister, so I knew him, but I have nothing further to add." Minister, do you or did you ever have a friendship with Mr Shiraz? And if so, what is or was the extent of this friendship?
Order. Before I call the minister, I'm going to ask order. Order on my right. Minister Gallagher.
Thank you. I had a professional relationship with Mr Shiraz, as many in this place, I presume, did, because he worked in this place as well for some time, and that is the extent of it. I think where this is getting to now, I would appreciate if people would think about the impact that it's having on women, because I have been inundated with calls from women's organisations and from women themselves that are concerned about how this debate is going to impact on women making choices. About women making choices about their own safety, and if you can live with your conscience on that, I can't live with mine. And so my responsibility is to stand up and say, if we're going to, I'm happy to answer questions like Ms Henderson has asked. It was a professional relationship from a journalist that I knew when I was in the ACT, and I came across him when he was working here when I moved up to the Senate. That is the extent of that. I expect that that relationship exists for a number of senators around this place.
I thank you, Minister. Senator Henderson, first supplementary.
Minister, it was reported by radio broadcaster Ray Hadley on Friday the 9th of June 2023 that you were invited to Mr Shiraz's first wedding in 2019. Minister, were you invited to the wedding?
Order on my right. Minister.
Okay. I didn't recall that until I heard it reported. And I had to ask the people I worked with at the time. I think I was Chief Minister. I got a lot of invitations to a lot of things. Some I was able to go to and others I weren't, and I didn't attend that one. The invitation was declined.
Thank you, Minister. Senator, order. Senator Henderson.
Just on a point of order, President, the question was, were you invited? So I'm just asking if the minister could indicate that, please.
That is not a point of order. The minister answered that. Senator Wong.
Directly to that.
Order. Order. Order on my right. This is question time. Senators are entitled to ask questions which you may or may not think are relevant. They are relevant to them and they are entitled to be asked in silence. Senator Watt. Order. Senator Henderson, second supplementary.
Thank you very much, President. Minister, in text messages that have been released and reported in The Australian on the 7th of June 2023, Mr Shiraz describes you as an old friend. Minister, have you ever invited Mr Shiraz to a personal event or a personal celebration?
Minister Wong. Just a moment, Senator Wong. Order on my right. I should not have to keep calling out for order. Minister Wong.
I take a point of order, President, and in the interest of trying to deal appropriately with this, we've not taken point of orders as to whether questions are in order, but I make the point that question about friendship neither relates to the minister's portfolio nor to a previous statement. And I must say, I again repeat my concern from yesterday, which is the use of private text messages of an alleged survivor in this place to ask questions. I would ask people to reflect upon whether that is an ethical thing to do, particularly given what the DPP has said about her state of mind.
Senator Birmingham.
President, just on the point of order, Senator Wong's premise that the question is not based upon public statements is incorrect. The primary question was based upon public statements made by the minister during an interview on Radio National Breakfast, and the supplementary questions follow from those public statements in that primary question.
Thank you. Because it's quite an unusual question, I'll just seek advice from the clerk. So I am advised, and I would urge senators to remember the primary question. The view is that we have drifted quite away from the primary question, and so I would invite the minister to answer the second supplementary to any extent she wishes to.
Could Senator Henderson just repeat it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Before I call Senator Henderson, I'm going to ask those particularly on my right to listen in silence. Senator Henderson.
Thank you, President. Minister, in text messages that have been released and reported in The Australian on the 7th of June 2023, Mr Shiraz describes you as an old friend. Minister, have you ever invited Mr Shiraz to a personal event or personal celebration?
Thank you, Senator Henderson. Minister.
Thank you. Well, can I start by saying I'm not responsible for how people describe their relationship with me. I'm also in Senator Henderson's questions. She raises again the text messages that have been published in The Australian, and I would again ask people to think about, when they are raising that, what that is sending out there where women are living right now in dangerous situations, and consider the impact on them. Frankly, we have a bigger job to do in here to protect those women, and when they see that seemingly illegal access to documents are then published in TV, on newspapers, and then repeated constantly in this place, the message to them is watch out, don't open your mouth. And I think that is wrong, and I think we have a responsibility to ensure that that isn't the message out of this place. But on the third part of her question, I don't recall, and the answer is no.
Please, Senator Henderson.
I was just going to raise a point of order of relevance, but the minister did come to the question. Thank you.
The minister was invited to answer the questions as she thought was appropriate. Senator Thorpe.
Thank you, President. My question is for the minister representing the Attorney-General. I have repeatedly asked the government to provide the legal advice they received around the impacts of the Voice to Parliament on the sovereignty of the First Peoples of this land. I was directed to the Referendum Working Group statement from February this year, which simply stated, and I quote, "All members of the expert group agreed that the draft provision would not affect the sovereignty of any group or body." Given that my repeated requests for this directly to the minister remain unanswered, can you please provide me with the definition of sovereignty that was used for this assessment?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Thorpe. Senator Thorpe, you're right. You have repeatedly asked this question, and in fact I think I answered it in estimates many months ago when you asked the question of me and the officials who were there. And we do keep telling you, but I know that you keep coming back with that question. And the fact is that the expert panel on the recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples sought advice on this issue. The advice was simple, and that is that constitutional recognition does not in any way foreclose on First Nations sovereignty. The Uluru Statement is clear that enshrining a voice to Parliament in the Constitution is linked to recognising the ancient sovereignty of our First Nations peoples. And it states, the Uluru Statement, as I'm sure you're aware, with substantive constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood. And that's why the Albanese government is looking forward to working with the community and all sides of politics, and I recognise there are people on all sides of politics who support recognising our First Peoples in our Constitution, and there are people on all sides of politics who support doing that through a voice to Parliament. And we look forward to working with everyone who supports that occurring, everyone in the broader community, the First Nations people, the overwhelming majority of whom support recognition and a voice to Parliament. We look forward to working with all of them to achieve a voice to Parliament in the Constitution through the referendum that we'll be having later this year.
Resume your seat, Senator Thorpe.
Just on relevance, the question was around the definition that was used to determine what sovereignty was of First Nations people. It was about the definition, which I still have not received. Definition.
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. I'll draw the minister that part of your question. Minister, please continue.
Well, unfortunately, Senator Thorpe, I think that every time we have attempted to answer your questions about sovereignty, you obviously have a very strong view on this, and I know you have an agenda politically around the voice to Parliament, and it is based on this question of sovereignty. So every time we answer the question, you're not satisfied with that answer and you come back effectively asking the same question. We keep saying this to you.
Minister, the time for answering has expired. Senator Thorpe, did you want to raise—
Yeah, just in terms of relevance, it's about definition.
Yes, Senator Thorpe, Senator Thorpe, I have drawn the minister to that part of your question.
What is the definition of sovereignty that the government are using?
Senator Thorpe, the minister, I can draw ministers to the question. I can't put words into their mouths. Senator Watt, you have a second left. Senator Thorpe's first supplementary.
Seems to me that a thorough legal analysis, especially on something so important as our sovereignty, since time immemorial, is impossible without actually defining what sovereignty is. Can you please provide me with a definition that is commonly used by the government in respect to First Nations sovereignty?
Thank you, Senator. Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Thorpe. All I can do is repeat what I've already said, which is that the expert panel on these issues has sought advice on the issue, and the advice was categorical that constitutional recognition does not interfere or foreclose on First Nations sovereignty. Now, I just reminded myself of the members of that expert
Minister,
group.
please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Relevance definition. How did the referendum group come up with a definition? Is it a colonial sovereignty or is it First Peoples sovereignty? What's the definition?
Senator Thorpe, when you raise a point of order, you do not repeat the question. You've raised the point of order. I think the minister is answering the question, and I'm going to invite him to continue. Minister.
Thank you, President. And Senator Thorpe, as I have done before, I'm happy to get the relevant minister's office to engage with you on this particular point. But I remind all the chamber that the constitutional expert group, who has categorically said that your concern is unfounded, includes former Justice of the High Court of Australia Kenneth Hayne,
Minister, please resume your seat. Just a moment. I'm just waiting for the hands-up people to sit. Senator Thorpe.
In terms of relevance, there is no evidence to what the minister is suggesting. We want evidence about the interpretation of First Nations sovereignty.
Senator Thorpe, the point of raising a point of relevance is to ask me to either agree with you that the minister's not being relevant and draw him or her to that part of the question, or advise you that, in my view, the question is being answered. It's not a debating time. There's plenty of other opportunity to do that, and that's what you're starting to do. So thank you. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. And as I say, I know, Senator Thorpe, that you have an agenda on this point to oppose the voice to Parliament, and that whatever we say won't convince you. But a former Justice of the High Court of Australia, along with several leading scholars in constitutional law from a number of different universities, found there was evidence to say that this won't interfere
Minister
with
Watt.
sovereignty.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Thorpe, second supplementary.
Has committed to a treaty with First Nations people, which they declined yesterday, mind you. A treaty can only be negotiated between sovereigns. Does the government thereby acknowledge the sovereignty of First Peoples in this country?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
As has been articulated in the Uluru Statement itself, the government does acknowledge this issue. And as we say, and as the expert panel has said, the voice to Parliament does not interfere with the sovereignty of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Now, as I say—
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
President, now let me get this right. Relevance. On the question, does the government thereby acknowledge the sovereignty of First Nations people?
Yeah, and the minister, you may not agree with the minister's response, but in this case the minister's being relevant, and I'm going to invite him to continue his answer. Thank you, Senator Thorpe.
Well, I have already answered the question in my opening points by the remarks that I made around sovereignty. And again, Senator Thorpe, with the greatest respect, I know that nothing we say to you will convince you of this point, because your agenda is to oppose the voice.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Well, I don't know what it is, but it's not personal. I'm asking for the black sovereign movement out there who haven't ceded their sovereignty, and who are watching right now about whether the government acknowledges sovereignty of First Nations people, because you can't have a treaty without one.
Please resume your seat. Once again, you're getting to debate rather than call a point of order. I agree with you that the minister should stick to the question and not— Senator Thorpe, I am attempting to answer your point. I will ask the minister to refrain from making a personal reference to you and stick to your question. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Now, as you probably know, Senator Thorpe, I did study law at university and I practice as a lawyer, but I'm not a professor of constitutional law. I'm not a former High Court judge of Australia. I'm not a former Vice-Chancellor of the Australian Catholic University. I'm not one of the people on the expert group on The Voice who have all said that the issue you're talking about is not a concern.
Minister, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
Relevance?
The minister is being relevant, and I will listen carefully.
Telling me his resume.
Senator Thorpe, please don't argue. I've ruled on it. Senator Watt, please continue.
Yeah, in the negative.
Yes. Yes. So my point is, I can't think of a more eminent group to advise this parliament on these matters. We have listened to their advice, and I'd encourage everyone to do so.
The time has expired, Minister Watt. Senator Polley. Order. Order. I've got a senator on her feet. Senator Polley.
Thank you, President. My question is to the minister representing the Minister for Housing and Homelessness.
Senator Polley, please resume your seat. Order. Order across the chamber. Senator Polley, please continue.
My question is to the minister representing the Minister for Housing and Homelessness, Senator Farrell. Following a decade of inaction and delay by the former coalition government, we have seen home ownership become increasingly difficult for many and homelessness on the rise. Ensuring all Australians have access to safe and affordable places to live is critical. Can the minister explain how the Albanese government's housing reforms will improve housing outcomes for Australians experiencing or at risk of becoming homeless, and what are the implications if it is further delayed?
Order. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And can I thank Senator Polley for her excellent question there. And I know she's deeply concerned about issues of housing and homelessness in her home state. And turning around the lost decade of inaction on the issue of housing and homelessness under the opposition will require a coordinated and ambitious housing reform agenda to address our nation's housing challenges. This is exactly what the Albanese government is doing. Central to our plan is the $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund that will help. Yeah, I will, Senator Watt. That will help to deliver new social and affordable rental homes for people that need them. A guaranteed ongoing pipeline of funding for social and affordable rental homes. The 30,000 homes the fund will deliver in its first 5 years are just one part of the Albanese government's ambitious housing agenda. The returns from the fund will also deliver $100 million for crisis accommodation for women and children, $30 million to build housing and services for veterans, and $200 million for the repair, maintenance and the improvement of housing in remote Indigenous communities. It is a lot of money, Senator Watt, but imagine the difference this fund and these homes will make to people at risk of homelessness in this country. We, on this side of the Senate, up to a certain point there, want to actually deliver homes for Australians who need them. This isn't a campaign tool for us. This isn't about door-knocking. This is about real people, those Australians who are facing homelessness. The Coalition and the Greens should stop playing politics and get out of the way so that we can get on with the job of delivering homes.
Minister, please resume your seat. Order. Senator Polley's first supplementary.
President, can the minister update the Senate on the Albanese Labor government's solution to acute homelessness? Challenges that Australians are facing, that is housing reform agenda, we will provide.
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And yes, I can, Senator Polley, I can answer that question because the Albanese government believes that everyone deserves a safe and secure place to call home. From $10 billion, from the $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund, we will deliver 30,000 new social and affordable rental homes with 4,000 properties for women and children fleeing domestic and family violence and older women on low incomes who are at risk of homelessness. The returns from the fund will also fund responses for people in urgent need. These include $100 million for crisis and transitional housing options for women and children, and $30 million to build more housing and fund services for veterans who are experienced or at risk of homelessness. We are committed to ensuring more Australians have a safe and affordable place to live and reduce homelessness.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. The time for answering has expired. Before I call Senator Polley, I'm going to remind senators. Senator Watt. I'm going to remind senators that Senator Polley is entitled to ask her question in silence. Senator Polley.
Thank you, President. Can the minister provide an update on what the Albanese Labor government is doing to provide support to people who rent a home?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Polley. And yes, I can, because tenants are a valued and important part of our communities, and renting has been getting tougher and tougher. We hear their concerns and we're acting to address them. The Albanese government is delivering the first substantial increase in Commonwealth rent assistance in over 30 years. The National Housing and Homelessness Ministerial Council has been tasked with developing a proposal to National Cabinet on the options to strengthen renters' rights. Of course, the answer to rental stress is a sustained boost in the supply of homes to rent and a substantial investment in new social and affordable housing. And this is exactly what the Albanese government is doing. But if the Greens can put aside their grandstanding and political games and put the Australian people first, the Housing Australia Future Fund will be the largest boost to social and affordable rental housing in a decade.
Has expired. Senator, order. 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 Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, President. President, my question is to the Leader of the Government in the Senate, Senator Wong. Minister, aside from the briefings provided by former Senate President Ryan, were you aware of any other aspects of sexual assault allegations or provided with any other information prior to them being made public on 15 February 2021?
Minister Wong.
First, in relation to the briefings or my knowledge, as the former Senate President Ryan has made clear, a number of senators, including me, were made aware of some details of these events as early as 2020. That knowledge firstly related to the retention of CCTV footage. As he outlined in his statement to the Senate in February of 2021, he contacted both Senator Cormann and me on the 16th of October 2020 to address queries regarding the retention of CCTV footage and to advise that we were undertaking an independent inquiry into the actions of DPS staff following the receipt of anonymous correspondence and its referral to the AFP. So that's what the President told the Chamber in 2021. The statement also makes clear that the President, and I quote, did not disclose to those senators any allegations of sexual assault. As you know, Senator Birmingham, after you were appointed as Leader of the Government and Minister of Finance, you were also briefed on these matters. The former President's statement provided to the Finance and Public Administration Committee states that the independent inquiry commissioned by the presiding officers reported to the Secretary of DPS on 29 October 2020. I was subsequently briefed on this report and provided a copy, as were you, Senator Birmingham, as Leader of the Government. At all times, I have sought to ensure that this matter was being appropriately handled by relevant authorities, including raising this matter with both the President and Senator Birmingham. The President's statement of the 1st of April 2021 makes clear the report did not contain Ms Higgins' identity, and the details I became aware of through the briefing process I've outlined were never made public by me or by others. I believe victims have a right to determine what course of action should be taken in relation to sexual assault.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Birmingham, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. Minister, aside from the disclosures made by Senator Gallagher, those briefings provided by former Senate President Ryan or information related to the Senate Finance and Public Administration Committee's work, were to your knowledge any other members of the Albanese government aware of any other aspects of sexual assault allegations or provided with any other information prior to them being made public on 15 February 2021, and can also ask you for clarity to make clear at the end of your answer as to whether you had any other prior information other than the details you just stepped through.
Minister Wong.
I've outlined the details and the sources of information which I had. In relation to others' knowledge, obviously Senator Gallagher has outlined her knowledge. Pardon me, Senator Gallagher hasn't outlined her knowledge. Her account, as given yesterday, is correct. She kept her the confidence in relation to the information she was provided with, including with me.
Senator Birmingham, second supplementary.
Minister, Senator Gallagher has told a Senate committee that no one had any knowledge. Yet She did have knowledge. Senator Gallagher told the Senate that she wasn't aware of the full allegations, yet Senator Gallagher refuses to deny advance receipt of a transcript of the broadcast. Senator Gallagher told the Senate that she did absolutely nothing with the information, yet Senator Gallagher refuses to deny reports she provided suggested questions in response to the information. Minister, isn't it clear that Senator Gallagher
thank you,
has
Senator
misled
Birmingham.
the Senate?
The time for asking
Why won't
questions
you ask her
has
to
expired.
correct it?
Minister Wong.
I reject those assertions contained in that question. I would make the point that Senator Gallagher has provided a statement and answered questions to this Senate, even going to whether or not someone was an old friend. I would make the point also that there are those who did owe the woman in question, Ms Higgins, a duty of care, and those persons still have failed to take account responsibility for their action.
Order. Please continue, Senator Wong.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a serious statement to make, Senator Henderson, and it is.
Order.
I think when those officers seek to blame everyone but themselves, and frankly, as Senator Gallagher has outlined, send a message to women around this country that you will be punished if you.
Order.
Well, you will be punished,
thank you,
including
Minister
the
Wong.
use.
The time for answering has expired.